Defense Secretary.
What country are you? Wait, what country are you from?
From the UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting. Why don't you go back to your country where you have a major migrant problem?
Okay,
And you, no. You should care about your own borders.
Do you care about American lives?
No. Let me tell you something. Do you care about people from your country? I don't care about your fake news. Do you have a relevant question? Yeah, this is an American journalist. Thank you.
I'm an American, and I'd like to hear your answer to what she's asked.
I'm not answering her question because I don't care about her network. If you would like to ask, I can answer.
Any concerns whatsoever about the complete disregard of operational security from the top level of this administration?
You want to know about complete disregard about operational security? You should talk about the Biden administration.
But I mean...
Welcome back to AllStarBuzz. Thank you for joining us. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Now, let's begin. Something stirred up a major buzz on daytime television, and it all started with a heated moment on The View. But before diving into what was said, let's talk about what's really going on behind the scenes.
Interesting.
That's how you do it as a journalist.
Yeah, yeah.
When one person, one journalist, regardless of what country they're from, asks a question that needs an answer, and that person gets passed over, if you're the next person, you ask the very same question.
Yeah.
And that's how you control this administration. This administration with the press, because they don't want to give the press access. They don't, I think, want... because they don't want to give the press access. They don't, I think, want journalists to really report the truth. They want, in essence, you know, to control the narrative of what's going on.
Yeah.
But if the press were only to band together and do what we just saw, I think the control would be back where our constitutional founders expected it to be.
What's all this hostility towards the allies? I mean, I just read that that the traveling to the U.S. from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa is down 12.8% compared to last year.
Well, those countries are giving travel advisories now.
They're not coming
here. And Canada. I mean, I have seen so many stories.
How many people are from Canada? Just clap. No one.
Oh, they don't want to come. They don't want to come.
That's the point.
I made my point.
No, there's all. Listen here. For Florida, Canadian snowbirds are big to our economy. For places like Maine, Canadians coming in the summer, very big part of their economy. There's all of these cancellations, and it's just, you know, it's vexing to see that they attack and denigrate and criticize and say and show such disdain for allies like Canada, like Denmark and Greenland, like Panama.
Finland.
On this signal gate, J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth were showing disdain towards the whole of Europe, calling them
Hegseth replied, I share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. That's one thing I don't think is getting enough attention in that signal leak is...
Well, there's so much.
Yeah, there is so much. But you're watching
do they know what we're talking about?
Well, the chat that got a journalist invited in and they all started...
One of the most common criticisms of this show is how it handles political discourse. It's not just the topics they're controversial by nature, it's the way they're edited, presented, and pushed onto viewers. Selective clips, partial truths, and completely ignoring the other side have become regular tactics. That's the root of a growing frustration from people who feel the show is more about pushing narratives than offering balanced discussion.
It was all week.
Yeah. Well, in that chat, they're trashing our allies, and we already knew. Yes. Yeah. Well, but no one jumped in and said anything more. It was about European freeloading.
Right.
Europe, the majority, aside from some Eastern European nations, they're all allies. And when you look at the Greenland, the Panama, the Canada, you team that up with the fact that the Trump administration has always buddied up to Russia's Putin, North Korea, President Xi, like all these different people. The combination, it's like they're eliminating the idea that we're on an international stage and we may need people in the future.
All right, and it's just the Canadians also helped us win World War II.
Yes, they did.
They were allies in World War II, and we should be more respectful to Canada.
They fight along with us. Every time we go to war, they're right there by us.
They're NATO members, and they served alongside us in Afghanistan and Iraq as well, as has Ukraine, who is not a NATO member, by the way. But I also, to bring into this conversation, J.D. Vance was supposed to, his wife was going to go to Greenland and apparently was not going to get a full diplomatic reception because Greenland's basically been being bullied by the Trump administration. He's now traveling there, and they're not rolling out the red carpet.
No.
They don't have leaders in the diplomatic corps greeting him. He's basically just going to a U.S. military base and disappearing. And I look at this from the lens of having worked for Mike Pence. And I traveled all over the world with him in more than 24 countries and spent a lot of time in Europe. When Pence showed up, the head of state would greet him. The full diplomatic response would they'd roll out the red carpet because they knew he cared about alliance. In fact, it was alliances. It was an open secret that European leaders preferred to meet with Pence over Donald Trump. And it wasn't that he was soft on, oh, NATO doesn't need to pay their fair share. He delivered the exact same message about Europeans pulling their weight on the international stage, but he did it through diplomacy and not bullying. I just don't know what he's doing.
Sure. There's all of these reports that that the people prepping the trip to Vance in the capital of Greenland have been going door to door trying to find family willing to receive her and couldn't find one. There's all of these people in Greenland who are now making up these hats, red hats that look like the Make America, it says Make America Go Away. So, you know, but whenever you see the Trump administration doing something, ask why.
That's
and
my
it's
question
always
about Greenland. What is his fascination with Greenland?
He said
we will go as far as we have to get control of Greenland. We need Greenland. Why?
This week, the reason why I think J.D. Vance all of a sudden is showing up in Greenland is to distract from the debacle that is the national security breach that they that all of America has seen with the signal.
Can I mention one thing?
It wasn't planned for him to go.
It was last minute he went.
It was announced on
Well, he's about as welcome there as shingles.
But okay, the Canada bit drives me crazy because he should not be saying we're going to take Greenland. There's a strategic advantage you can argue. Canada, the kindest people on earth, he wants to make the 51st state. Does he realize Canada is to the left of us? Like a Canadian conservative is way to the left of me, and a Canadian leftist is to the left of people here.
And Canadians don't want us.
And it's larger than the state of California.
Yeah.
So if you imported 40 million Canadians and made them the 51st state,
Republicans may not win.
it would be Democratic rule for the next 20 years.
They
Like, it doesn't even make sense.
True.
They would lose.
It's like, Canada, take one for the team. Please, people, save us.
Whether you love or hate The View, there's no denying its influence. But with influence comes responsibility. And lately, that responsibility has been questioned. Why do certain guests or viewpoints seem to get shut down or misrepresented? Why does it feel like we're only getting part of the story? These questions aren't coming from just one side of the aisle either. They're building momentum across different groups. And this latest incident, involving a shocking statement about moving to Canada, just added fuel to the fire. So here's where things really kicked off. In the middle of a broader discussion, one of the co-hosts dropped a statement that sent shockwaves through the room. She said she was considering moving to Canada with her family. The studio audience reacted immediately, and so did viewers across the internet. On the surface, it might have seemed like a casual comment, maybe even just a dramatic expression of frustration. But to many, it represented something deeper, a growing divide in how Americans view their own country. This wasn't just about Canada, it was about dissatisfaction with the political climate, with the direction of the nation, and the feeling that things have gone too far. What made the moment even more powerful was the applause that followed. People were clapping for the idea of leaving the country, and that stirred intense emotions. Was it a rejection of certain political ideologies? Or a deeper sign of disillusionment? It opened up a floodgate of debate. Is leaving really the answer? And if you're part of a platform that claims to represent American voices, what message does it send when you publicly declare that you're ready to walk away? For many viewers, it felt like more than just a talk show. It felt like a betrayal. But that moment wasn't isolated. It was part of a bigger pattern that's been growing for years. More and more, The View has been accused of hypocrisy. When they criticize one side of the political aisle, it's often relentless, emotional, and loaded with judgment. But when it comes to their preferred leaders or parties, the same energy isn't there. Take, for example, their treatment of the Biden administration. Concerns that would normally spark outrage suddenly become afterthoughts, dismissed or brushed aside. What frustrated many was the double standard. If someone calls out the Trump administration, they're celebrated. But if someone questions Biden, they're shut down, ridiculed, or completely ignored. It's this kind of selective outrage that makes people tune out. It doesn't matter whether you support one president or another, it's about consistency and fairness. When the criticism feels one-sided, the whole conversation loses credibility. And in that moment when the Canada comment was made, wasn't just a reaction to current events, it was part of a broader frustration about how discussions in the media are handled. It's not about hating a show or a host, it's about people wanting honesty and balance, especially from platforms that reach millions. To really understand how deep the frustration runs, you have to look at how stories are edited and presented. A perfect example unfolded with a clip involving Marjorie Taylor Greene and a UK journalist. The View aired a portion of the exchange, but only a portion. Key parts were cut out, leaving viewers with a version that painted one side in a much harsher light while ignoring the full context of what happened. When people went back and watched the full, unedited exchange, the difference was striking. The conversation was tense, yes, but not as one-sided or irrational as it had been portrayed. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Over and over again, media outlets, including The View, have been called out for trimming interviews or moments, just enough to shift the narrative. This is what has people so fired up. It's not that these shows are discussing politics, it's how they're doing it. When clips are carefully edited to fit a message, trust starts to erode. And once that trust is gone, every segment, every guest, every opinion starts to feel more like a performance than a real conversation. That's where viewers draw the line. They want transparency, not theater. Now here's where the double standard becomes even more obvious. When someone calls out the Biden administration, especially on issues like national security, border control, or foreign policy, it's often dismissed or redirected. But the moment the Trump administration is mentioned, it becomes an open season for criticism. The panel goes all in, piling on with opinions, snark, and even personal jabs. This inconsistency has created a major credibility problem. It's not just political bias, it's the way the show frames reality itself. Viewers start to notice when one administration is protected and another is attacked relentlessly, no matter the facts. And that's what sets people off, not just conservatives, but anyone looking for honest dialogue. The frustration really boils over when people see important topics being twisted for applause lines or viral moments. It's one thing to have political opinions, it's another to weaponize them while ignoring or burying opposing facts. And in doing so, the show risks turning serious issues into entertainment, leaving audiences more divided and more confused than ever. For many, it feels like a betrayal of what journalism and discussion are supposed to be. You can't demand accountability from one side while giving the other a free pass. That's not truth. That's theater. This brings us to something that really set people off. How The View portrayed an exchange involving a journalist asking a tough question, only to be dismissed based on her nationality and news network. The show chose to highlight parts of the exchange that painted one side as aggressive and out of control, but left out the build-up and context that explained the tone and the pushback. What was missing? The part where the journalist's credibility was being challenged not because she was from another country, but because her outlet had a reputation, in some eyes, for biased coverage. The part where deeper questions about border issues and migrant crises were raised, hard topics that were brushed aside in the version The View aired. It wasn't about disrespecting a reporter, it was about calling out what some perceive as selective concern for global issues. By not showing the full clip, The View didn't just edit out words, they edited out the full scope of the argument. And this is exactly why people have trust issues with mainstream platforms. When coverage gets clipped and spun to fit a neat little narrative, audiences start asking, what else are they hiding? The demand isn't for perfection, it's for the full picture. That same theme carried into another hot-button moment when the conversation turned to America's relationships with its allies. The panel criticized certain figures for showing disdain toward allies like Canada, Denmark, and Greenland. But again, the criticism was only aimed at one direction, mainly the Trump administration and its handling of diplomacy. This led to a broader discussion about America's place on the international stage. Hosts questioned why some leaders would cozy up to authoritarian figures while pushing away longtime allies. And on paper, that's a valid question. But what frustrated viewers was the lack of balance. The moment anyone tried to defend the strategic reasons behind those choices, such as keeping adversaries close or negotiating from a position of strength, it was brushed off or ridiculed. Meanwhile, the genuine contributions of allies like Canada were acknowledged, mentioning their support in global conflicts like World War II and Afghanistan, but only as a way to further criticize one side of the political aisle. The message wasn't about unity or diplomacy. It felt more like another chance to bash Trump while ignoring real-world complexities. That kind of oversimplification, wrapped in applause and sound bites, is what keeps dividing audiences. It's not that people disagree with valuing allies, it's that they want real conversations, not one-sided lectures. Things escalated even more when the discussion shifted to public reactions, especially from audiences who were cheering statements like, "Make America go away." That line, printed on hats worn in Greenland, became a symbol of how polarized the conversation had become. What stunned many wasn't just that the hats existed, but that an American audience applauded them during a live taping of The View. That applause hit a nerve. For critics of the show, it wasn't just distasteful, it felt like a moment of betrayal. Here were Americans clapping for a slogan that called for the disappearance of their own country. To some, it was just satire or frustration expressed through humor. But to others, it signaled how deep the anti-American sentiment had crept into public spaces, even among fellow citizens. The frustration wasn't just with the message, it was with the normalization of it. Viewers asked, how did we get here? How did a mainstream show reach a point where the audience applauds something so divisive and no one on the panel pushes back? It wasn't about silencing criticism of the US. It was about the tone, the disrespect, and the sense that American identity itself was being mocked for applause. And that's a line many felt had been crossed. That sense of crossing a line only deepened as more details emerged about the situation in Greenland. J.D. Vance, a prominent political figure, had planned a visit there, but the reception wasn't exactly warm. Reports suggested that local officials weren't rolling out the red carpet. In fact, he was mostly being directed to a U.S. military base, with no formal diplomatic welcome. And while some brushed it off, others saw it as a direct response to how the Trump administration had treated Greenland in the past, especially the controversial idea of buying the country. But what really got people talking was how the visit was framed. The media described it as awkward and even desperate, with some residents reportedly refusing to host diplomats and others wearing hats mocking American leadership. This wasn't just an uncomfortable trip, it was a visual representation of how America's image had shifted in the eyes of other countries. And while the View panel used it as another opportunity to criticize Trump-era diplomacy, the irony wasn't lost on viewers. These same critics had once championed strong alliances and diplomacy, yet seemed oddly quiet when the Biden administration faced chilly receptions abroad. The standard had changed again, and audiences were picking up on it. The contrast between past and present diplomacy became even sharper when one panelist brought up Mike Pence's international visits. She described how, during the Trump administration, foreign leaders often preferred meeting with Pence over Trump, not because the message was different, but because of the way it was delivered. Pence, she claimed, communicated with respect and diplomacy, while Trump leaned into confrontation and bravado. But here's where the frustration bubbled up again. That same argument about tone versus substance was being used selectively. While Trump was criticized for being blunt or abrasive, the core message about international partnerships and financial contributions from allies wasn't all that different from previous administrations. The real difference was the packaging. And yet, packaging was being treated as everything. For critics of The View, this felt like another example of cherry-picking. Diplomacy is important, yes, but what about the actual results? The agreements, the outcomes, the shifting dynamics on the world stage. These rarely made it into the discussion unless they fit a preferred narrative. What viewers wanted was not just who smiled the most on the tarmac, but who got the job done and whether that job benefited the country. That deeper context was once again missing. And then came the moment that truly stunned many viewers: the applause for a hat that read, "Make America Go Away." It wasn't just a clip from Greenland anymore. Now it was happening in real time, on American soil, in a studio filled with an American audience. And people weren't shocked or offended. They were clapping, laughing, cheering. For critics of the show, this wasn't just misguided, it was heartbreaking. How could a group of people, living in the very country that gives them the platform to speak freely, celebrate a message that essentially calls for its erasure? That's the question that echoed in the minds of many who saw the moment. It became more than political. It felt cultural, emotional, a sign that something deeper was unraveling in public discourse. You can disagree with policies, protest leadership, and demand change. But when the message becomes about wiping away the very nation that protects your right to do all of that, where's the line? This was the tipping point for a lot of people, not because they were outraged by disagreement, but because they saw what felt like open contempt for the country itself. And that's not a debate over policy, that's a crisis of values. As the conversation spiraled, it circled back to one lingering question. If these hosts and audiences feel so strongly against America, why stay? That sentiment echoed across comment sections and reaction videos. The panel had spent the episode criticizing U.S. place, policies, mocking diplomatic missteps, and even applauding anti-American slogans, yet they remained on national television, living comfortably in the country they appeared to resent. This disconnect struck a nerve. For many Americans, especially those who've served, worked hard, or simply believe in the core values of the country, it felt like a slap in the face. The irony of enjoying the freedoms, wealth, and safety of the U.S. while constantly bashing it didn't sit right. And when one of the hosts suggested just moving to Canada only to be met with applause, it wasn't received as bold or brave. It was seen as performative. The takeaway for a lot of viewers was this: if you don't like something, work to improve it, but don't pretend you're above the very system that supports you. Otherwise, the criticism starts sounding less like a push for progress and more like contempt. And when that contempt is cheered on national television, it forces a bigger question: what are we really applauding? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.